The reality is some people have to be left behind. Personally, I'm done explaining to people why capitalism does not benefit the common person. If people want to continue to worship celebrities and the 1%, there is nothing that we're going to do at this point to stop them. It is genuinely mind-boggling to me how many people are okay with the status quo when if we all work together, all of our lives could be so much better. I blame a lot of this on mass consumerism and hyper-individualism within American culture, but regardless, I just think some people are blinded by the reality that we live in. I also think that a lot of this obedience comes from the fact that people think that they'll be able to reach the 1% if they do what they're supposed to do. Also, some people are just genuinely unempathetic and couldn't care less whether or not life got better for the common person. But for those who genuinely do care and want to make the world a better place, we have to start putting our money where our mouth is. We can't continue to support corporations and individuals who genuinely go against our best interest.
I've been going out to Starbucks to get my coffee every single day, and I realize that that's one of those things that people are like, oh, that's a very poor financial decision. So I considered trying to cut down on it. But then I realized that, like, right now, literally everything is a poor financial decision. Everything that we do is a poor financial decision. Putting 50% of your income towards rent is a poor financial decision. Taking out a student loan for hundreds of thousands of dollars where there's essentially no ROI whatsoever is a poor financial decision. Breaking your ankle, horrible financial decision. You want to get sick? That's a very fiscally irresponsible thing to do, kid. I'm sorry. Literally everything is a poor financial decision based on the definition that we have been told of a poor financial decision. So I'm just gonna enjoy my Starbucks, like whatever. And I think that's the way that like a lot of young people feel right now. Is it's like we've kind of lost the ability to build for the future. So people are just like, whatever. I'm just like, why would I save now? I'm just gonna enjoy my life because this is all gonna come crashing down at some point. So I might as well have my little Starbucks and go to Fire Festival or do whatever I want to.
Gen Z isn't lazy or unmotivated. They are rationally adapting to an economy where traditional milestones have become mathematically impossible at traditional ages. I really like this Business Insider piece about 25 being the new 21, and it reveals something really interesting around how economic reality shapes generational behavior. You know, when the path to adulthood becomes more expensive and less certain, young people adapt by taking longer to walk it. And the data in the article talks through, how college costs have gone up, entry-level wages have stagnated, housing prices have gone up a lot more relative to income. The traditional timeline for independence becomes more fraught rather than something that just kind of everybody did on a pre-described path. And, previous generations could reasonably expect that working hard in your early 20s would lead to some sort of financial independence. But today's young people, are often seeing that working really hard in your early 20s might lead to financial survival, with independence coming later, if at all. And that's why we're seeing a lot of trends of younger people living with their parents longer, taking longer to kind of reach some of those traditional milestones, etc. And what might look like arrested development can often be very strategic, right? Like why rush into paying a ton of rent when you're only making $35,000 a year? Like, why not just live with your parents instead? Why get married and start a family when you can't afford healthcare for yourself? And this delayed timeline also reflects changed family dynamics. When parents, especially like older boomer parents, can provide that financial support that previous generations maybe couldn't offer, staying at home longer becomes a very rational wealth building strategy rather than a potential sign of failure. And the cultural narrative around this shift is particularly interesting. I think some older generations interpret this delayed independence as laziness or entitlement, but they're missing how economic conditions have fundamentally changed the risk-reward calculations around traditional adult milestones. From a financial psychology perspective, Gen Z's approach might actually be more mature than previous generations. They're making decisions based on mathematical reality rather than cultural expectations. But the challenge is that this delayed timeline can create its own psychological stress. When you're 25 and still living with your parents, it's hard not to feel like you're behind, even if you're adapting to these circumstances that you're currently in. So it's really important to remember that generational differences in financial behavior usually reflect economic conditions more than cultural values. So when the economy changes, rational behavior changes too.
When people are like, what are your plans for the weekend? I'm like, getting my rent's worth in this economy. You know how much I pay to live, have an apartment every single day? I gotta spend time in there. Also, you know what else I paid for? My phone. Pay my phone bill. Gotta get my money's worth on that. I'm gonna be looking at screens at home. Okay? That's what I'll be doing.
One thing I'm finding interesting is that the older generations kind of acknowledge how cooked we are now. Like, I saw a tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how her son isn't able to afford a house, which is ironic because she's part of the problem. But really, in general, I've seen a sentiment like growing that boomers and Gen X know that Gen Z and millennials can't afford anything, and that generally the American dream is dead. My mom is a conservative, and she was talking to me about this, and she was saying that the conservative commentators that she listens to are saying the same thing. It's like, how did we get in this situation in the first place? This will be the first American generation that's poorer than the last. And then AI is coming for everyone's neck. Where do we end up when AI replaces all the good jobs and then no one can afford a home? We need to transform our economy into something new. Something that reflects the times that we're in. Otherwise, we're going to keep staying broke.
The reason there's a declining birth rate is because people now view kids as consumer products. No, I don't mean that they don't have value. There's huge emotional value of having and raising a kid, and you're fulfilling one of the most basic human goals, which is to reproduce. But from a pure financial perspective, they are an expense from the moment they take their first breath to when they graduate college at 22 years old. People can't really afford to have kids, but the deeper reason is because they want to provide a higher quality of life than they did in the past for their kids. The average American thinks that they need $186K a year in order to be financially comfortable. The standard is just higher nowadays than in the past. That's why. We also tend to see more educated societies on average level out at around 2 kids, and the level of education in the US has only continued rising. Combine this with the fact that people are dating less, and you get an aging society and a falling birth rate. Not everyone wants kids anymore because not everyone thinks they can deliver on the quality of life that they think that their kid should have. The standard has just been raised, and as a result, how people view having kids has also changed.
If you graduated high school or college and went into the real world between the years of 2016 and 2025, the world hates you, and I can explain to you why. The average rent for a 2-person bedroom in 2010 was $1,008. As of April of 2025, it is about $1,836 for rent. The average monthly grocery costs about $250 to $300 per person. Today, it's about $504 per person. And obviously, you're probably going to go at least twice a month. You're always not going to eat at home. You might want to go out and eat sometimes. The average cost to eat out was $11.60 per person in 2010. And in 2025, it's $15 to $20 per person. Oh, but I don't want to eat out. I want to go get some McDonald's. Depending on what you get, the average McDonald's meal price in 2010 was $5. Now it's $10. Maybe you want to go on a date and see a movie tonight. Well, in 2010, it was $7.89 per person to go see a movie. And in 2025, it's $11.31 per person to see a movie. And that's just without buying concessions. To go to college in 2010, it was $112,000 with everything included, on average. And on average in 2025, it was $146,000, depending on where you go and location, but this is just the national average. And hopefully after college, you can get a good job so you can pay off this money. Well, it's going to take you about the same time as it did in 2010. And I just graduated college, and it's been about this time, and I still haven't found a job yet. Because the market sucks. You want to know what else hasn't really changed? The minimum wage in 2010 versus today. It is still $7.25. In 2010, $100 would have been $100. And $100 today would be $139.60 in 2010, which is about an inflation increase of 39.6%. And almost everything has risen 40% due to inflation. So we're living in some good times now.
Some political news that media outlets and especially Democrats are not talking about. Number one, our stock market is at an almost record-breaking high. Numbers so high that CNN actually called them remarkable. This goes for Dow, S&P, NASDAQ. Basically, the entire market is just booming and again, almost surpassing its record. Number two, Operation Dragonfly was successful. And not only was this successful, where 60 missing children were located and rescued and given resources for after they were rescued so that they won't go back into a life of drug abuse, domestic violence, or streets, but it was the largest child rescue mission in American history. Number three, this is former President Joe Biden's chief of border security. And back in 2024 at a House hearing, he admitted and showed proof that he was forced to lie by former President Joe Biden and his administration about how many terrorist apprehensions were being done at the border. He said that they were threatened with job losses if they released to the public how much danger we were in and how much harm was happening at the border. He said that the administration put on a facade to the public that the border was secure and everything was going well, when in reality, the number of terrorists crossing over doubled doubled to tripled to quadrupled from the previous years before Biden was in office. And again, they were forced to lie about it, otherwise they would lose their job. Why I mention this now is because more information is coming to light, and they are hoping in this investigation that people are actually going to start getting held accountable. This goes hand in hand with a video I posted a few days ago. Number 4 being that it has just been confirmed that the use of auto pen in former President Joe Biden's presidency was not actually used by him, and not just for a couple days or a couple months, but for 2 consecutive years. Joe Biden was not the one using the auto pen on presidential documents. So congratulations, we had our first female president and we didn't even know it. Talk about a threat to democracy. I mean, where are the protests? Our next one is the Supreme Court decided to side with parents on the matter of opting out of their children having access to books that have LGBTQ plus content. For siding with the parents is because if a child is exposed to this at a young age and the parents don't have an option to opt out, then it does go against the Constitution in parents having an option for religious freedoms. In similar light, the Supreme Court, they also side with Texas, among 20 other states doing the same thing, for age verification necessities when using an adult content website. And the last one, which I think everyone knows at this point, and yes, Democrats and Republicans have both talked about this, but Zoran did win the primary for New York City. Some people say that this will be a good change that New York City and the country desperately needs because obviously something's not working. Others say socialism will not work here. It doesn't really work in other countries, and especially New York was built on capitalism, so to take that away is a massive risk. I think it just depends on how one sees it, but again, I think we all know this by now. Let me know if you guys want a part 2.
Please, someone tell me how you are surviving in this economy, because let me tell you something, I'm not surviving in this economy. Context, I'm a paralegal, I make $22 the hour, but however, after taxes, doing the math, I'm getting paid as if I only made $17 the hour. I get paid bi-weekly. One of my paychecks completely swiped by my rent, okay? So one of my paychecks, I don't even get to see it because I obviously have to pay for rent if I don't want to be homeless. So all of that paycheck, 99% of it completely gone. After paying off my rent, I only have $100 to survive for the next 2 weeks. So that includes gas and groceries. And then my second paycheck of the month is completely gone. My car payment, dental insurance, dental treatment, hospital bills, renter's insurance, groceries, what else? Electricity, literally like my credit card debt, like after paying off everything with my second paycheck, I am left with negative $356. Negative $356. That means I'm not able to afford paying off all of my bills every single month. I cannot afford to pay off my bills. And mind you, I have a very extremely demanding job. And I cannot afford to live. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's in legal studies. I am a certified paralegal. And I cannot afford to breathe, to live. And literally, like, I've been surviving because my parents have been helping me out a lot. Thank God I have amazing parents. But if it weren't for them, I don't know what I would do. My fiance right now, he's unable to work. He just had surgery. He can't work at the moment. So the situation is horrible. How are we surviving? If I want to go to the movies, if I want to buy pizza on a weekend, right? If I want to go to the movies to decompress, if I want to go to the mall, walk around, if I want to go to Starbucks and buy a coffee and just, like, I don't know, relax, I cannot afford to even enjoy my time. I can't. You would think that after a long week at work, I get to go home and go out, relax, have a little bit of fun, enjoy life just a little bit. But I can't, because I cannot afford that I cannot afford my bills. I cannot afford to live. So how are we surviving? Please, someone tell me, how are we surviving? Because I am not surviving. I feel like I'm drowning, and there seems to be no way out. And for those of you thinking, I have my hair and my nails done because my parents help me out with money, and they know I work so hard, so they offer to pay for my nails and my hair because they're amazing parents, but I'm about to be 27. I don't want to have to be relying on my parents. I'm supposed to be helping them. And I have looked at other jobs. Other jobs are offering less than what I am making here. Less money than what I am making here. So how are we surviving? Because I do not seem to be able to find a way out.
According to Consumer Affairs, Gen Z's purchasing power is now 86% lower than baby boomers at the same age, resulting in the lowest number of first-time homebuyers in nearly 50 years. And as 90% of employers refuse hiring recent grads, it raises the question, has Gen Z's future been reduced to nothing more than a monthly subscription? While each generation has entered adulthood during unique economic hardships, the recoveries that followed often created even deeper systemic challenges, most evident in younger generations' growing inability to achieve the same financial comfort their parents once enjoyed. A cycle that dates back to the Great Depression. Unlike their parents, who experienced rapid industrial growth, rising wages, and the rampant consumerism that defined the Roaring '20s, the greatest generation, born between 1901 and 1927, came of age during the worst economic collapse in modern history, where by 1933, unemployment had reached a record high of 25%, with an estimated 78% of Americans living below the poverty line, resulting in newly elected President Franklin D. Roosevelt to launch the New Deal, a series of federal programs that took direct responsibility for job creation at a national scale, particularly for young Americans. By the height of the crisis, youth unemployment is estimated to have reached as high as 60% in many urban areas, prompting Roosevelt to establish the Civilian Conservation Corps, which enrolled over 3 million men between the ages of 18 and 25 to work on conservation projects across the country, earning $30 a month, or roughly $740 today. And by 1935, the Works Progress Administration expanded these efforts, employing 8.5 million Americans to build roads, parks, airfields, and public infrastructure. And while the New Deal did help stabilize the labor market, it also gave rise to a new way of thinking about the role of government, specifically among young Americans' views of capitalism. In 1939, journalist and political commentator John Chamberlain, who would later become a central figure in shaping 20th century American libertarianism, became deeply concerned with what the crisis was doing to the political identity of an entire generation, viewing mass youth unemployment not as an economic failure, but as a direct threat to the foundations of democratic stability. Where in a 1936 survey of over 13,000 Maryland residents, aged 16 to 24, Chamberlain found that most were deeply cynical about democratic institutions, yet broadly supportive of government control over wages, labor, and financial relief, where he feared that the prolonged economic stagnation was creating what he described as a trapped generation. Writing, young people have no memory of a good economy with plentiful opportunities. They have limited opportunities for job training and no experience to fall back on when work becomes available once again. They are a trapped generation that will explode. And the fascist explosion will come as it came in Italy and Germany, regardless of education, where Chamberlain illustrated this political volatility through the story of Joe Cairns, a young office boy who once identified as a communist, convinced that this economic system is never going to spread out enough to take us all in. But after a modest promotion to magazine writer, Cairns left politics behind, not because his beliefs changed, but because opportunity had replaced his need for ideology, which proved to Chamberlain that access to education alone wasn't enough. What young people really needed was structure, vocational training, night schools, and long-term job pipelines, stating, education is a weak bulwark for democracy if democracy can't deliver the goods in the forms of jobs, a future, or just plain hope. However, by 1941, America's youth was now called to action as the United States officially entered World War II, with capitalism now positioned in direct opposition from fascism, where over the next 4 years, the economy shifted into full-scale mobilization, creating over 17 million jobs and driving unemployment down to just 1.2%. And as major corporations converted to weapons manufacturing, with small businesses becoming military suppliers, wages rose by 65%, with companies also beginning to offer health insurance and pension plans. And to further provide support to the returning soldiers, President Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, otherwise known as the GI Bill, which gave 7.8 million veterans access to free college tuition and low-cost home loans, where as a result, the nation moved from a renting culture, with 60% of households renting prior to the war, to one built on ownership, with 62% of Americans owning their home by 1960, where the support from both private industry and federal policy allowed the greatest generation to become parents during the strongest middle class in American history, paving the way for the silent generation and early baby boomers to come of age in what would later be called the golden age of capitalism. Born between 1928 and 1945, the silent generation was shaped by the uncertainty of the Great Depression and the devastation of